After I lost my house in a flood, my son said, "Just sleep in your car a little longer. I'm busy." So I did. Now, months later, I sleep in my own luxury home. When he and his wife showed up with moving boxes saying, "It's perfect for our nursery," I changed the locks and the will. I'll tell you everything. First, let me thank you for watching Granny's Voice. Please subscribe and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We might give you a shout out in our next video. Today's special shout out goes to Belinda Neely from Carrollton. Thank you for being part of our family. Now, let me tell you everything. The old blanket smelled like fast food and rainwater. I pulled it tighter around my shoulders as I sat in my tiny car. 4 months had passed since the big storm took my home away. The parking lot behind the closed pizza place had become my bedroom. Every night I watched the same broken streetlight flicker on and off. My son David's words still hurt my heart from our last talk. "Mom, just stay in your car a bit more. Sarah and I are super busy getting ready for the baby." You get it, right? I understood too much. The storm had taken everything I owned. My cozy apartment on Cherry Street, my photo albums, my grandmother's teacups, 35 years of special things I had saved. Insurance gave me money for the building, but not for my memories inside. At 58 years old, I had nothing left but my small blue car and the clothes I grabbed before the water came in. David seemed nice at first. "Sure, Mom, you can sleep on our couch for a while. Just until you find a new place." But a while became too long. And too long became impossible when his wife Sarah started leaving me notes about the electric bill and how much food I ate. She would tape them to the bathroom mirror. The morning I packed my things back into my car, David was making breakfast for their 3-year-old son Tommy. He barely looked at me when I told him I would be staying somewhere else. "That's probably better," he said, putting jam on Tommy's toast. "Sarah has been upset about the baby coming, and you know how she gets when she's worried." I knew exactly how Sarah acted when she was worried. She got mean. She got bossy. She made me feel like I was bothering everyone in what used to be my temporary home. Now I lay in my back seat with my winter coat as my blanket, thinking about my own mother. Did she feel this way when she got old? Like nobody wanted her around. Like love was too hard for people. My phone made a noise against my chest. A message from David. "Hope things are good. Sarah and I found a bigger apartment. Baby number 2 is coming this summer." I looked at the words until the screen went black. Then I put my phone away without writing back. He hoped things were good. He hoped things were good while I slept in a car in winter while he celebrated new apartments and growing families. The next morning I drove to the public library like I did every day. I parked in the same spot by the side door. The librarian, a sweet lady named Maria Santos, stopped asking questions about why I came every day. She just smiled when I walked past her desk to the computers where I spent hours looking for jobs and trying to rebuild my life. It was there, on a Wednesday that felt like every other Wednesday, that I saw the email that changed everything. "Dear Helen Martinez," it started, and I had to read the name at the bottom twice. "Wilson and Partners, lawyers for people who die." My heart beat fast as I read more. "We work for your late uncle, Roberto Martinez. We have been trying to find you about money he left you in his will. Please call our office soon to talk about what he gave you." I sat frozen in the plastic chair, reading the email over and over. Uncle Roberto, my father's brother, who moved to Texas in the 1990s and slowly stopped coming to family parties. I thought he had died years ago, lost like so many family members do. But he remembered me. Calling the lawyer felt like a dream. "Yes," they said. "Roberto Martinez left everything to you. A ranch in Austin, Texas. Bank accounts, life insurance money." The lawyer sounded bored as he told me numbers that made my hands shake. "The property is worth about $900,000, he said. "The cash is another $280,000. There are some bills to pay, but you will get over $1 million, Mrs. Martinez." I hung up and sat in quiet shock. Around me, the library was full of normal sounds. Kids doing homework, old people reading newspapers, babies laughing in story time. Regular people living regular lives, not knowing that the homeless woman at the corner computer had just become rich. The drive back to my parking spot felt like a dream. I kept thinking I would wake up in my car and find out this was just another hope born from being tired and cold. But the lawyer's card was real in my pocket, and his email was real on my phone. I thought about calling David right away, sharing the news, seeing his face change from distant politeness to excited happiness. But something stopped me. Maybe it was remembering Sarah's notes about money. Maybe it was how easily he had dismissed my homelessness as just a small problem. Or maybe it was the angry feeling that had been growing in my chest for months, getting bigger every night I slept in a car while my son slept in his warm bed. Instead, I drove to a motel. A real bed for the first time in months. I paid cash for 2 nights and took the longest, hottest shower of my life. In the mirror, I saw a woman I barely knew. Thinner than I had been in years, with sunken cheeks and eyes that expected bad things to happen. But something else was there too. Something I had not seen in months. Spark of hope. A hint of the woman I used to be. Sarah's mean notes and David's busy schedule had worn me down to nothing. I spent the evening on the motel's internet looking at Texas ranch pictures, seeing photos of the place that was now mine. A beautiful ranch house with a big porch and fruit trees in the yard. It needed some work, the pictures showed, but it was gorgeous. It was home. My phone buzzed. Another text from David. Haven't heard from you in a few days. Everything okay? I typed and deleted many responses. Part of me wanted to share the news, to let him know his mother was not as helpless as he thought. But a bigger part wanted to wait, to see what else might happen in the coming days. I'm fine, I finally typed back. Just figuring some things out. The next morning I made plans to fly to Texas. The lawyer would meet me at the ranch, help me understand everything Uncle Roberto had left behind. I bought a plane ticket with money I had been saving for a security deposit on an apartment. Money I had been guarding like treasure. As I packed my few things, everything I owned still fit in one suitcase. I thought about the woman I had been 4 months ago. The woman who lost everything to floodwater and accepted her son's reluctant help because she thought she had no choice. That woman was gone. In her place was someone stronger. Someone who had learned that love could have conditions and family could be temporary. Someone who discovered that the people who said they cared about you most could also be the ones most ready to abandon you when caring became hard. I left the motel key on the desk and walked out into the cold morning. My car started right away, like it knew we were finally going somewhere better. But I did not drive to the airport immediately. Instead, I drove past David's apartment building. A nice place in a good neighborhood with Sarah's red car in the parking lot and Tommy's bike by the front door. The place where I had been tolerated for 5 weeks before being gently, politely pushed out. I sat in my car across the street, engine running, watching the windows for signs of life. Part of me wanted to knock on the door to tell David about the money, to see if wealth might bring back the son who used to call me every weekend just to talk. But I had learned something in these months of sleeping in parking lots and spending days in libraries. I had learned that dignity, once lost, was not easily found again. And I had learned that sometimes the people who hurt you most are the ones who do it with smiles and excuses and careful words that sound like love. I put the car in drive and headed for the airport. Behind me, David's building got smaller in my mirror. Ahead of me, Texas waited, and with it, the chance to discover who I might become when I no longer had to be grateful for scraps of love from people who saw me as a problem. The change had already started. I could feel it in how I sat up straight, in how steady my hands were on the wheel. I was no longer the woman who accepted sleeping in a car because her son was too busy to care. The Texas sun felt like a warm hug on my face as I got off the plane in Austin. For 4 months, I had lived under gray winter skies, sleeping in shadows of empty buildings and strip malls. Here, even in winter, the air was warm and full of promise. Wilson and partners had arranged for a taxi to take me straight to the ranch. The driver, a friendly man named Carlos Rivera, spoke with the easy warmth of someone who had lived in Texas his whole life. "First time in Texas?" he asked, driving through the city with practiced skill. "First time in 30 years, I replied, watching tall buildings give way to open fields like pages in a picture book. "What brings you back?" "An inheritance from an uncle I barely knew." Carlos's eyes found mine in the mirror. Funny how family works sometimes. The ones you think you can count on let you down. And the ones you forget about save your life. I thought about David's text messages. Happy updates about apartment hunting and baby planning sent to a woman sleeping in a car. Yes, I said quietly. Funny how that works. The ranch on Bluebonnet Road was even better than the pictures. A 1950s ranch house with original wood floors and big windows. It sat on 10 acres surrounded by old oak trees. The front porch wrapped around the entire house, and despite needing paint and some repairs, it had the strong bones of a home built to last forever. Lawyer James Wilson met me at the front gate, a thin man in a fancy suit who looked surprised when I got out of the taxi instead of an expensive car. Mrs. Martinez, I was expecting, well, someone different. I looked down at my worn jeans and thrift store shirt, the nicest clothes I owned. Different how? Your uncle talked about you often in his final years. He made it sound like you were very successful, well established. I assumed. He stopped talking, maybe noticing how I held the gate tight as I looked at the ranch that was now mine. My uncle was remembering me from 30 years ago, I said. People change. Life changes. Inside, the house told the story of a man who lived alone but was not lonely. Every room was filled with books, plants, and carefully chosen furniture. The kitchen had been updated in the 2000s, and while old, everything was clean and worked well. Uncle Roberto had left behind not just a house, but a complete life. The neighbors have been taking care of the yard and getting the mail, Mr. Wilson explained as we walked through rooms that smelled like wood polish and coffee. Mr. Johnson next door has a key. He has been very worried about what would happen to this place. In the master bedroom, I found photographs on the dresser. Roberto as a young man, then older, then elderly, but always smiling. In many pictures he was not alone. A small woman with kind eyes appeared in photos spanning decades. Together at dinner tables, on trips, working in what I recognized as this very garden. Was my uncle married? Yes. Mr. Wilson cleared his throat. He shared his life with someone, yes. Maria Gonzalez. They were together for 42 years before Maria passed in 2021. Your uncle never quite got over losing her. I picked up a photo of the two of them, both in their 70s, holding hands as they sat on this same front porch. The love between them was clear even in the still picture. The way Roberto leaned toward Maria. The way Maria's fingers traced circles on Roberto's hand. Did Maria have family? A daughter in California who never visited. She fought the will when Maria left everything to your uncle. Very angry about it, according to Roberto. I understood then why Roberto had chosen me. Not because we had been close, but because we had both learned that family was not always about blood, and that love given freely was rarer than love expected by right. Paperwork took hours. Bank accounts, investment papers, insurance policies. A paper trail of a life carefully planned and responsibly lived. Roberto had been a retired mechanic who had invested wisely and lived simply. He had owned this ranch free and clear for 20 years. The cash assets totaled $293,000 after taxes and fees, Mr. Wilson explained. The ranch is valued at $890,000, though in this market it could sell for much more. Your uncle also kept a life insurance policy that brings the total to just over $1.1 million. The numbers felt unreal, like prices for things in a store I had never imagined shopping in. But what felt real was the house around me, the weight of keys in my hand, the knowledge that I had a home again. After Mr. Wilson left, I walked through the rooms again, this time alone. In the kitchen, I found a note taped to the refrigerator in neat handwriting. For the neighbor who waters the plants and gets my mail, there is beer in the fridge and cookies in the red tin. Help yourself, R. I knocked on the door of the house next to mine. A man in his 60s answered, his face lighting up when I introduced myself. You are Roberto's niece. Oh lady, he talked about you all the time. Helen this, Helen that. He was so proud of you. The man, Bill Johnson, invited me inside for coffee and what turned out to be 2 hours of stories about my uncle. He worried about you, especially this past year, Bill said. He had a feeling you were going through something hard. He wanted to reach out but did not want to bother you. Helen is strong, he would say. But everyone needs help sometimes. I thought about the months I had spent sleeping in my car, the careful counting of every dollar, the slow loss of dignity that comes with having nowhere to go. Roberto had somehow felt my struggle from 1,000 miles away, while my own son, living 30 minutes from me, had seen it as just an inconvenience to his growing family. He changed his will 8 months ago, Bill continued. Added a part that if anything happened to him, I should watch for you. He said you might not know about the money right away, and you might need extra kindness when you got here. That evening, I stood on Roberto's front porch, my front porch, and called David for the first time since arriving in Texas. Mom, finally. I was starting to worry. Where are you? Texas, I said simply. Texas. What are you doing there? Did you find work? Something like that. I watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of red and orange that I had forgotten existed. I got an inheritance. Ranch. Silence. Then what do you mean got an inheritance? My Uncle Roberto died. He left me his ranch and some money. Uncle Roberto. I thought he died years ago. How much money? There it was. Not I am so sorry he died or how wonderful that you have a home again. Just how much money? Enough, I said. Well, that is great news. Sarah and I were just talking about how we could help you get back on your feet. This fixes everything. When are you coming home? Home. As if the car I had been sleeping in for 4 months was home. As if the parking lot behind a closed pizza place was where I belonged. I am not sure I am coming home, David. Another pause. What do you mean? Your life is here. Tommy misses his grandma. And with a new baby coming. You seem to manage just fine with me sleeping in my car for 4 months. Mom, that is not fair. We let you stay with us. For 5 weeks until Sarah got tired of me being there. That is not. Look, maybe we did not handle things perfectly, but we are family. This inheritance is wonderful, but you do not need to run away to Texas. We can help you find a nice place here, close to us. Close to them. Close enough to be handy when they needed babysitting or help with housework, but not so close as to be a daily reminder of their ability to be cruel. I need to think about things, I said. Think about what, Mom? You are not making sense. Come home. We will figure this out together. But as I looked out at the garden Roberto and Maria had planted together, at the neighborhood where people left notes for each other and watched over empty houses, I realized I might already be home. I will call you in a few days, I said, and hung up before David could say more. That night, I slept in a real bed for the first time in months. Roberto's bed, in Roberto's house, surrounded by the comfort of a life well lived. The sheets smelled like lavender, and through the open window, I could hear the gentle sound of wind in the oak trees. But sleep did not come easily. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from David, each one more urgent than the last. Mom, call me back. We need to talk about this properly. Sarah thinks you are not thinking clearly. Sarah thinks. Of course, Sarah had an opinion about my inheritance, about my choices, about my life. Sarah, who had left notes about money when I was homeless. Sarah, who was now, according to David's earlier texts, looking at bigger apartments and planning bigger families. I turned off my phone and lay in the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of my new neighborhood. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle echoed through the night. Cars passed sometimes, their headlights briefly lighting up the bedroom walls. Tomorrow I would begin the work of building a new life. Tomorrow I would decide who deserved to be part of it. But tonight, for the first time in months, I was warm, safe, and sleeping in a place that belonged to me. Tonight, I was no longer the woman who had accepted sleeping in a car because her son was too busy to care. 2 weeks in Texas had changed me in ways I was only starting to understand. My skin had lost the pale color of winter and homeless nights. My shoulders no longer carried the permanent hunch of someone expecting bad news. When I caught my reflection in Roberto's old mirrors, I saw glimpses of the woman I had been before the flood, before Sarah's mean notes, before I had learned to make myself small enough to fit into other people's idea of convenient. I started each morning with coffee on the front porch, watching Bill Johnson work in his garden next door. He would wave and call out news about neighborhood happenings. The Martinez family's new puppy, the Wilson's deck project, The book club that met every Tuesday at the community center. Normal life, the kind I had forgotten existed during my months of just trying to survive. The house itself was becoming mine through small daily choices. I had moved Roberto's collection of Western novels to make room for the few books I had saved from the flood. I had rearranged the kitchen to suit my right-handed cooking style. Most importantly, I had hung my mother's cross, the only piece of family history I had managed to save, on the living room wall where morning light would catch its silver surface. My phone had been thankfully quiet for days after I stopped answering David's increasingly frantic messages. But this morning, as I sat with my coffee watching Bill trim his roses, it rang with David's number. Mom, thank God. I've been worried sick. I'm fine, David. Just settling in. Settling in. What do you mean settling in? You cannot just disappear to Texas and expect us not to worry. Tommy keeps asking where Grandma went. The mention of Tommy sent a familiar pain through my chest. My grandson's sweet face. His joy in simple games and bedtime stories. But even that love had been filtered through David's convenience, visits planned around his work schedule, time together watched for signs that I might be staying too long or expecting too much. How is Tommy? Yes. He is fine, but that is not the point. The point is you running away instead of dealing with reality. Sarah and I have been talking and we think you should come home right now. This whole Texas thing is just you avoiding problems. Sarah and I have been talking. As if Sarah's opinion about my life mattered. As if the woman who had made me feel unwelcome in my own son's home had any right to judge my choices. What reality am I avoiding exactly? You cannot just play house in some dead man's home and pretend your real life does not exist. You have duties here. Family here. I had no family when I was sleeping in my car. Oh, do not be so dramatic. That was temporary. We were figuring things out. For 4 months, David. I was homeless for 4 months while you figured things out. And now you are not. Problem solved. So sell the ranch, take the money, and come home where you belong. Where I belong. In David's world, I belonged wherever was most convenient for him. Close enough to provide free babysitting and holiday help. Far enough away not to interfere with his real life. I like it here, I said simply. You do not even know anyone there. I am getting to know people. The neighbors are wonderful. Neighbors are not family, Mom. No, I said, thinking of Bill's daily waves, of the woman at the grocery store who had spent 20 minutes helping me find the right spices. Of the book club members who had already invited me to join them. Sometimes they are better. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had ended. Finally David spoke, his voice tight with anger. Fine. You want to have your little adventure, go ahead. But do not expect us to keep your life on hold forever. Sarah got promoted at work, remember? We are looking at apartments. Real apartments, not some old man's leftover life. Congratulations on Sarah's promotion, I said, meaning it less than he probably thought. We are actually flying out there next weekend. My coffee cup stopped halfway to my lips. What? We found cheap tickets. Sarah has some vacation days to use before the end of the year. We thought we would come see this famous ranch. Help you get your head on straight. Maybe look at the property values while we are there. Help me get my head on straight. As if moving from homelessness to home ownership represented confused thinking rather than incredible good luck. I do not think that is a good idea, David. Why not? We are family. We want to see where you are living. Make sure you are safe. And honestly, Mom, some of the things you have been saying lately worry us. This whole cutting off contact thing is not like you. It was not like the old me. He was right about that. The old me would have been grateful for any attention, any sign that I mattered enough to worry about. The old me would have spent the week cleaning frantically and shopping for food I could not afford to make sure David and Sarah felt welcomed and comfortable. But the old me had slept in a car for 4 months while her son planned apartment upgrades. When are you arriving? Yes. Saturday afternoon. We will get a hotel near you. Somewhere nice. Sarah found this great place that is not too expensive with her work discount. Of course they would stay in a hotel. Not because my ranch was not big enough. Roberto's guest room was lovely. But because staying with me would require admitting that this was actually my home, Not just a temporary confusion they needed to cure me of. They needed to keep their distance to maintain control. "I will pick you up at the airport," I heard myself say. "Perfect. Oh, Mom, you will see. Once you spend some time with us, remember what you are missing. You will realize this whole Texas thing is just grief talking. Grief makes people do strange things." After I hung up, I sat on the porch for a long time, watching Bill work in his garden. Eventually, he noticed my stillness and came over to the low fence that separated our yards. "Everything all right, Helen? You look like you have seen a ghost. My son is coming to visit." Bill's face brightened. "How wonderful. You must be excited." "Should be. But you are not." I found myself telling Bill about the phone call, about David's assumption that I was having some kind of breakdown that needed fixing, about Sarah's opinions and their plans to help me get my head on straight. Bill listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding in understanding. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, pruning shears still in his hands. "You know," he said finally, "Roberto went through something similar when he first moved here. His brother, your father I suppose, came to visit about 8 months after Roberto and Maria bought this ranch. Came with his wife and a whole lot of opinions about Roberto's life choices. I had never heard this story. What happened? Oh, they had quite the visit. Lots of suggestions about how Roberto should live, who he should be. They stayed 4 days and spent most of it trying to convince him to move back to California, find a nice job, live a normal life." Bill snipped a dead flower with more force than necessary. "Roberto told me afterward that he learned something important that week." "What?" "That love does not try to change you back into who you used to be. Real love celebrates who you are becoming." That afternoon, I drove to a hardware store in a neighboring town, one where nobody knew me yet. I bought new locks for the front and back doors. Good ones, the kind that could not be easily broken. The friendly woman behind the counter, Susan Martinez, helped me choose the right tools and gave me step-by-step instructions. "Changing locks is one of the most empowering things a woman can do," she said as she rang up my purchase. "Makes a house truly yours." I spent the evening installing the new locks, working slowly and carefully with Roberto's toolbox and Susan's instructions. It was satisfying work, requiring focus and precision that left no room for worry about the coming weekend. When I finished, I stood in the entryway, turning my new keys in their new locks, listening to the solid sound of metal clicking into place. Saturday morning I woke early and spent extra time getting ready. I chose my outfit carefully, a green dress I had bought the week before. The first new clothing I had purchased in months. It fit well and made me look successful, settled, like a woman who belonged in her own home. The airport was chaos. Holiday travelers and delayed flights creating an atmosphere of barely controlled stress. I found David and Sarah at baggage claim, both looking tired and annoyed from their journey. David hugged me briefly, then stepped back to study my face with the kind of look usually saved for suspicious packages. "You look different," he said. "I look rested." Sarah gave me a quick hug and immediately began complaining about the flight, the airport, the Texas heat she had heard terrible stories about. I listened politely as I led them to my car. Not the old blue one, but a reliable used Toyota I had bought the week before. "Nice car," Sarah said with surprise. "The inheritance must have been bigger than you told David." It was a casual comment, but it revealed everything. They were not here out of concern for my well-being. They were here to assess my wealth, to understand exactly what I had inherited and how it might benefit them. "Big enough," I said, echoing my previous non-answer to David. During the drive to their hotel, Sarah kept up a steady stream of talk about their apartment hunt, her promotion, their expanding family plans. It was clear they had practiced this presentation, designed to remind me of everything I was missing by staying in Texas. "We found this incredible apartment," Sarah said. 3 bedrooms, perfect for our growing family. The only problem is it is a bit expensive, even with my raise. We are thinking about asking family for help with a security deposit." There it was. The real reason for their visit, delivered with the practiced casualness of people who had learned to wrap requests for money in concern about family obligations. I pulled into the hotel parking lot and helped them with their luggage, agreeing to pick them up for dinner in 3 hours. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of them in my rear-view mirror, standing close together on the sidewalk, clearly discussing strategy for the evening ahead. But I had strategies of my own now. I was no longer the desperate woman who had been grateful for 5 weeks of reluctant shelter. I was someone with a home, with choices, with the power to say no. Dinner at Austin's fanciest restaurant had been Sarah's suggestion, a place expensive enough to show that they were not struggling financially, just strategically seeking help with their investment in a dream home. Sarah had worn her newest dress, and David had spent the first 30 minutes discussing her promotion in terms that suggested she was practically running the company now. I had listened politely, making appropriate sounds of congratulation while watching them perform their careful dance of success. They were good at it, I had to admit. The perfect young couple with expanding dreams that just needed a little family support to become reality. The apartment we are looking at is really an investment, Sarah explained as she cut her chicken with surgical precision. Property values in that area have increased 25% in the last 3 years. With a new baby coming, we need the space, but we are also thinking long-term, building wealth for the family. Sounds wonderful, I said. David leaned forward, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. I wish you could see it, Mom. It has this amazing kitchen with granite counters, and the master bedroom has a walk-in closet that would be perfect for all the baby stuff. The living room is huge. Tommy would have so much room to play. And there is a den off the kitchen, Sarah added casually. Perfect for when family visits. You could stay as long as you wanted when you come to visit. Family visits. A polite way of saying I could be a guest in their home when they needed something, but never truly welcome to stay. The carrot to go with the stick they had been using since my arrival in Texas. How much help are you looking for? Asked directly. They exchanged a glance so quick I might have missed it 4 months ago, but homelessness had taught me to read the subtle communications between people who saw me as a problem to be managed. Well, David said carefully, we were hoping for maybe $40,000, $50,000 at the most. Just for the security deposit and first month. We would pay you back, of course, once Sarah's next promotion comes through. $50,000. More than I had ever had in my bank account in my entire life before Roberto's inheritance. Money they had calculated I could afford because they had done the math on my new circumstances without ever asking about my plans for the future. That is a lot of money, I said. But you have it, Sarah said. Her tone suggesting this made the decision obvious. And it is family. This is what family does for each other. Family. The word they had weaponized since my arrival in Texas, using it to justify their assumption that my inheritance should solve their problems. Tell me about Tommy, I said, changing the subject. How is he adjusting to the idea of being a big brother? David's face softened immediately. Oh, he is so excited. He keeps hugging Sarah's belly and talking to the baby. Yesterday he told me he wants to teach the baby how to ride his bike. For a moment, I saw my son as he had been when Tommy was born. Tired but glowing, so proud of his perfect baby boy. Before Sarah's promotion became his primary concern, before apartment hunting consumed his weekends, before my homelessness became an inconvenience to be managed. I miss him, I said quietly. Then come home, David said immediately. That is what we have been trying to tell you. Tommy needs his grandma. This new baby will need you too. You are running away from the people who love you most. Am I? Because when I was sleeping in my car, neither of you seemed to think Tommy needed his grandma very badly. Sarah's jaw tightened. That is not fair, Helen. We offered you our couch. For 5 weeks until I became inconvenient. You were not inconvenient. You were. She paused, clearly searching for diplomatic language. You were going through a hard time. Sometimes people in crisis need professional help. Not just family support. Professional help. As if my homelessness had been a mental health crisis rather than the natural result of losing everything in a flood and having nowhere else to go. I was not having a breakdown, Sarah. I was having a housing crisis. And now you are not, David said brightly. So let's move forward. You have this amazing inheritance. We have this incredible opportunity with the apartment. And Tommy has grandparents who want to be part of his life. It all works out perfectly. I excused myself to the restroom, needing a moment away from their carefully planned presentation. In the mirror, I looked at the woman I had become. no longer hollow-cheeked and desperate, but not yet entirely sure of her own power. I thought about Roberto and Maria, who had built a life together based on mutual respect and genuine love. I thought about Bill, who had chosen to befriend a stranger simply because kindness was his nature. And I thought about the new locks on my doors, the keys that belonged only to me. When I returned to the table, Sarah was showing David something on her phone. Photos of the apartment they wanted to rent, probably, or calculators that showed how my money would make their dreams possible. "I would like to see where you are living," David said as I sat down. "Tomorrow before we fly back." "Course. Maybe we could stay the night," Sarah suggested. "Save on the hotel bill, get a real feel for the neighborhood." There it was. The assumption that my home was available to them, that my space could be occupied without permission because we were family and family did not need to ask. "I'm sorry, but that will not be possible," I said. "Why not?" David's eyebrows drew together in confusion. "Is the ranch not livable or something?" "The ranch is perfectly livable. I just prefer to keep my own space." "But we are your family," Sarah said, as if this explained everything. "Yes, you are. And you have a hotel room." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. I could see David processing this refusal, trying to understand how the mother who had accepted sleeping in a car rather than bother anyone had suddenly developed boundaries. "You are being ridiculous," he said finally. "We flew all the way out here to see you, and you will not even let us stay one night in your house. You flew out here to look at my inheritance and convince me to give you money for yours." Sarah's face flushed red. "That is not. We are concerned about you. You are not acting like yourself." "You are right," I said. "I am acting like someone who has learned the difference between being wanted and being useful." David's eyes filled with tears. Real ones, I thought, though I was no longer certain I could tell the difference. "How can you say that? You are my mother. Love you. I know you do. But your love comes with conditions I am no longer willing to meet." "What conditions? What are you talking about?" "The condition that I be grateful for whatever scraps of attention you are willing to give me. The condition that I not expect too much, ask for too much, need too much. The condition that my needs always come second to your convenience." I reached for my purse, pulling out my wallet to pay for dinner. It was a small gesture, but meaningful. I was no longer someone who needed others to pick up the check. "I will drive you back to your hotel," I said. The ride was silent except for David's occasional sniffles and Sarah's muttered complaints about Texas traffic. When I pulled up to their hotel entrance, David turned to me with the expression he had perfected as a teenager. Part wounded innocence, part manipulative desperation. "Mom, please do not let some old man's ranch come between us. Do not let money change who we are as a family." Some old man's ranch. As if Roberto had been nothing more than a convenient benefactor. As if his carefully preserved home was just a windfall to be cashed in. "Money did not change who we are, David. It revealed who we have always been." Sarah got out of the car without a word, but David lingered, his hand on the door handle. "We will come by tomorrow morning before our flight," he said. "Maybe you will feel differently after you have had time to think." "Maybe," I said, though we both knew I would not. That night, I sat on Roberto's front porch with a cup of tea, watching the neighborhood settle into evening quiet. Bill's house was dark. He had mentioned going to his son's for the weekend, but other windows glowed with warm light. Families going about their Sunday evening routines. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "I love you, Mom. I hope you remember that." I typed and deleted a dozen responses before settling on, "I love you too. That is why this hurts so much." But I did not send it. Instead, I turned off my phone and went inside, locking my new locks behind me. Tomorrow would bring the final confrontation, the moment when I would have to choose between the family I had been born into and the life I was building for myself. For the first time since David's call announcing their visit, I felt ready for that choice. I had spent months learning to survive on scraps. Of shelter, of dignity, of love. I had forgotten that I deserved better until Roberto's inheritance reminded me that some people understand the difference between charity and care, between obligation and genuine affection. In the morning, David and Sarah would arrive expecting the mother and mother-in-law they had always known. Grateful, accommodating, willing to sacrifice for their happiness. Instead, they would meet the woman I was becoming. Someone who understood her own worth. Someone who had learned that the most radical act of self-love is refusing to accept less than you deserve. The locks were changed. The boundaries were set. Tomorrow I would discover whether love could survive the loss of convenient exploitation. Or whether some relationships only work when one person holds all the power. I woke before dawn and made coffee in Roberto's kitchen, watching the sky lighten over the Texas hills. In a few hours, David and Sarah would arrive for what they undoubtedly expected to be a final negotiation. One last chance to convince the confused old woman to see reason and remember her family obligations. But I was not confused. For the first time in months, possibly years, I saw everything with perfect clarity. By 8 o'clock I was dressed and ready. I had chosen my clothes with the same care I had taken the day before. The blue dress that made me look competent and successful, paired with a silver bracelet Roberto had left in his jewelry box. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman who belonged in this house, who had earned her place in this life. Bill had returned from his son's house the night before, and I could see him moving around his kitchen, probably preparing for the day ahead. Part of me wanted to tell him what was coming, to have an ally nearby when the confrontation began. But this was something I needed to handle alone. At 9:15, a rental car pulled into my driveway. David and Sarah emerged looking tired and slightly hungover. Too much wine with dinner, as they had planned their strategy, perhaps. Sarah carried a folder, which struck me as both pathetic and telling. She had brought paperwork to a family visit, documents to support whatever argument they had rehearsed. I opened the door before they could knock, stepping onto the porch instead of inviting them inside. "Good morning," I said pleasantly. "How was your hotel?" "Fine," David said, his eyes scanning the house behind me as if looking for an opening to slip past my guard. "Can we come in? We do not have much time before our flight. Actually, I think the porch is perfect for our conversation." Sarah's jaw tightened with irritation. "Helen, it is 38 degrees out here. It is 55 degrees and sunny. Quite pleasant for December." I settled into one of the wooden chairs Roberto had arranged for watching sunsets. After a moment's hesitation, David and Sarah took the remaining chairs, though both looked uncomfortable with this outdoor negotiation. "Mom," David began, his voice taking on the patient tone he had probably practiced. "We talked after dinner last night, and we want to apologize if we came on too strong about the apartment thing. We know you are still adjusting to your new situation." My new situation. As if inheriting a beautiful ranch and financial security was a medical condition that needed managing. "I am adjusting quite well, actually." "That is wonderful," Sarah said, opening her folder with unnecessary drama. "But we want to make sure you are thinking about the big picture. Long-term planning. At your age, it is important to consider how to maximize your assets." My age. I was 58, not 88. But in Sarah's mind, I was apparently too elderly to make financial decisions without her guidance. "What kind of long-term planning did you have in mind?" Sarah pulled out a stack of papers. Printouts of real estate listings, rental calculations, investment projections. She had done her homework. I had to give her that. "Well, for starters, this ranch is way too big for one person. The upkeep costs alone must be eating into your inheritance. And Texas property taxes." She shook her head as if personally wounded by the state's tax structure. "You could sell this place, buy something smaller and more practical back home, and still have hundreds of thousands left over to help your family build wealth." "Help my family build wealth," I repeated slowly. "Exactly." David leaned forward eagerly. "It is about creating generational wealth. What is the point of having all this money if it just sits here while your family struggles with rent and daycare costs?" "Are you struggling, David?" He blinked, apparently not expecting the direct question. "Well, no, not struggling exactly. But with the baby coming and Sarah's career growth, we need to position ourselves for success. The apartment we want is not just about us. It is about creating the right environment for Tommy and the new baby. Good schools, safe neighborhood, room to grow. And you think I should subsidize this positioning? We think you should invest in your grandchildren's future, Sarah said smoothly. Instead of rattling around in some dead man's ranch playing make-believe about starting over at 58. The silence that followed her words was complete. Even the morning birds seemed to have stopped their singing. David's face went pale as he realized Sarah had crossed a line they had probably agreed she would not cross. Sarah, he said quietly. That is not. No, let her finish, I said, my voice steady despite the anger building in my chest. I am curious about this make-believe life I am apparently living. Sarah, encouraged by what she mistook for calm acceptance, leaned back in her chair. Look, Helen, I get it. You have had a rough few months. The flood, the temporary housing situation. It was all very traumatic. But you cannot just run away to Texas and pretend to be someone you are not. You are a grandmother from Ohio, not some Texas ranch woman. This whole thing is just postponing the inevitable return to reality. And what reality is that? That you belong near your family. That your purpose is supporting the next generation, not playing house with someone else's life. There it was. The truth underneath all their careful maneuvering. In Sarah's mind, my value was entirely practical. I existed to provide free childcare, holiday hosting, and now financial support for their ambitions. The idea that I might have my own dreams, my own right to happiness, was literally unthinkable to her. I looked at David, who was staring at his hands, unwilling to meet my eyes. He was not disagreeing with Sarah's assessment. He was just embarrassed that she had stated it so bluntly. You know what is interesting? I said conversationally. 4 months ago I would have agreed with you. I would have sold this ranch, moved back to Ohio, and handed you whatever money you asked for. I would have been grateful that you still wanted me in your lives, even after proving how much of a burden I could be. Mom, David started. But I held up a hand. But then I learned something important. Do you know what it was? Neither of them answered. I learned that some people invite you into their lives, and some people just tolerate your presence until it becomes inconvenient. I learned the difference between being loved and being useful. I stood up, smoothing my dress, feeling the solid weight of my house keys in my pocket. David, I love you. I love Tommy. I will love the new baby. But I will not subsidize your life while you treat mine as disposable. We are not treating your life as disposable, David protested, finally looking up. We want you to be part of our lives. That is what this whole conversation is about. No, this conversation is about you wanting my money. If you wanted me to be part of your lives, you would not have let me sleep in my car for 4 months while you shopped for bigger apartments. Sarah snorted dismissively. Here we go again with the car thing. You act like we threw you out on the street. You did not throw me out. You just made it clear I was not welcome to stay. Because you were. Sarah caught herself. But I could see the words she had been about to say. Depressing. Negative. Burden. I was what, Sarah? You were going through something we could not fix, David said quickly. We thought some space might help you get perspective. And now I have perspective. I can see quite clearly that you view my inheritance as a solution to your problems rather than my reward for surviving yours. I walked to the edge of the porch, looking out at the neighborhood Roberto and Maria had chosen for their life together. Bill was watering his plants, and he waved when he saw me. I waved back, feeling the simple pleasure of being seen and acknowledged by someone who expected nothing from me but friendliness. So what happens now? David asked, and I could hear real fear in his voice for the first time. Now you go catch your flight home. You rent whatever apartment you can afford on Sarah's salary. You raise your children and build your life without expecting me to pay for it. And us. David's voice was small. What happens to us? I turned back to face him, seeing not the manipulative man who had orchestrated this weekend's performance, but the little boy who had once run to me when he scraped his knee, seeking comfort and band-aids. That depends entirely on whether you can love me without expecting me to be grateful for the privilege. Sarah was gathering her papers, her face red with anger and frustration. This is ridiculous. You are throwing away your family over money. I am not throwing away anything, Sarah. I am refusing to purchase love that should be freely given. Fine, she snapped, standing abruptly. But do not come crying to us when this Texas fantasy falls apart and you are alone with nothing but your pride. I have been alone before, I said quietly. It is not as scary as you think. David stood more slowly, tears streaming down his face. For a moment, I thought he might apologize, might acknowledge what they had done to me and what they had tried to do this weekend. Instead, he wiped his eyes and lifted his chin with a gesture I recognized from his childhood. Defensive pride masquerading as strength. I hope you are happy, he said. I am getting there. I stood on the porch and watched them load their luggage into the rental car. David looked back once as they pulled out of the driveway, but Sarah stared straight ahead, already planning her next strategy, no doubt. After they disappeared around the corner, I sat back down in Roberto's chair and pulled out my phone. I had 12 missed calls and 37 text messages, but I deleted them all without reading them. Instead, I opened my contacts and scrolled to a number I had memorized but never used. Mr. Wilson answered on the second ring. Helen, how are you settling in? Very well, thank you. I have a question about making changes to my will. There was a brief pause. Course. What kind of changes? I want to establish a scholarship fund for women over 50 who are starting over after losing everything. And I want to leave the ranch to someone who will appreciate what Roberto and Maria built here. I can draft something for you. Do you have a beneficiary in mind? I looked over at Bill's house where he was now trimming bushes with the patient care of someone who understood that beautiful things required tending. Yes, I said. Think I do. That evening I called the book club Bill had mentioned and asked about joining. The woman who answered, Linda Thompson, seemed delighted to welcome a new member. We are reading Second Chances next month, she said. Stories about women who found their strength later in life. You will fit right in. As the sun set over the Texas hills, I sat on my porch with Roberto's copy of the book, reading about women who had discovered that the second half of life could be entirely different from the first. The phone was silent. No frantic calls from David. No guilt-inducing messages about family obligations. The silence felt like freedom. Tomorrow I would start planning the scholarship fund. I would plant a garden of my own. I would host the book club in a living room where my mother's cross caught the afternoon light. I would live a life of my own choosing, surrounded by people who saw my presence as a gift rather than a burden. And if David and Sarah ever learned to love without conditions, without expectations of financial return, they would be welcome in that life. But if they did not, I would be just fine without them. The woman who had slept in a car for 4 months was gone. In her place was someone who understood that dignity, once reclaimed, was worth more than any family's approval. The doors were locked. The will was changed. And I was finally completely home.